It is quite difficult to make forecasts and projections about the future. It is not really clear who is the author of that genius sentence, and spares many people the obligation to forecast. Maybe it's Mark Twain or baseball players or someone else. It is really difficult to make forecasts, but this is what we are about to do now, to see what the future might look like in the Middle East and North Africa. What do they expect from Europe, and what is Europe prepared to give? And how close is the European East to the Middle East?
We'll talk about that with a very distinguished panel of guests. Nikolai Mladenov is a Minister of Foreign Affairs of Bulgaria. Luís Chamado is a Vice Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Portugal. Carl Bildt is the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Sweden. Ivan Krstev, he's from Center of Liberal Strategies, member of the board of European Council for Foreign Relations from Bulgaria. George Ishak, he's activist and member of the leadership of Kefaya from Egypt. And Said Sadek, he's professor of political sociology from the American University in Cairo. I'm Boyko Vasiljev, journalist from Bulgarian National Television. Трима външни министри.
3 foreign ministers, 1 activist, and 2 people from the academia, 2 from the Middle East, 2 from the European East, 1 of the European North, and 1 of the European South. So we can really say that we have a discussion between civilizations, but let's see if they will figure out the common ground. Mr. Mladenov, I would like to hand you the floor first, because you are directly connected to the idea of this conference in the first place. Can you tell us if the European East can tell a story to the Middle East, some optimistic hypothesis for the future, or can you only say, just don't do what we did? Many optimistic theories about the future are possible. Of course, there are also many lessons learned that can sound don't do what we did. And it is important for us, the countries who have gone through the transition for the last 20 years, is to actually say that our experience is unique. There is no other part of the world which collectively brought together many countries who have experienced at the same time this dramatic change. Of course, it happened differently in any of those countries, but from the viewpoint of time, we tend to forget about certain common things. So, for example, roundtables were organized at the very beginning of this process in many of the countries. However, the beginning was quite turbulent in some countries. For example, in the process of the dismantling of former Yugoslavia. Some people were making 1 step ahead, 2 steps back, and the process was really different. Bulgaria was different from Poland. Poland was different from Romania, and so on and so forth. In the long run, we all have the fundamental freedoms. The major goal was achieved, but the historical and cultural context has also been taken into account. This is the major lesson that we must now convey to our friends from the Middle East. We have to tell them that, yes, indeed, you do have your own historical and cultural contexts. In each country, things will develop in a different way. We managed to see what happened in Tunisia, what happened in Egypt, and how different it looked like from the serious conflict that we witnessed in Libya. And the extremely painful experience with the transition in Yemen, the extreme bloodsheds in the first days of the Syrian events. And these are all different developments. However, what happened in Southern Eastern Europe is similar to what's happened in the Middle East. Freedom is the most important thing. We are reiterating this all over the conference. Human rights and freedoms are the universal desire of each human being. And 20 years ago, there were many people who tried to explain that Eastern Orthodox people were not capable of democracy, or the Slavs were not capable of having market economy, or that the traditions in Eastern Europe differed so much from the institutes in Western Europe. But in one way or another, this was disproved. Everybody who went out on the squares in the Middle East and wanted their freedom back can disprove that Islam and democracy are incompatible. It is only natural to want to be equal and to want to have institutions and an institutional-based government rather than an autocratic regime. If this will prove to be the case, we're still about to see, but this is the major challenge that we think we're faced with. I believe that there are strong forces in the Arab world who are able to prove that those universal values are indeed universal and can be upheld in that region. Thank you.
What has EU to offer to the Middle East and North Africa, apart of good words of encouragement?
Well, thank you so much, and let me begin just thanking Nikolai for the invitation and the opportunity to be with you today. I think this initiative is a very important initiative. We have been in the last couple of weeks, months, discussing this issue intensely at European Union level. But we need to multiply initiatives interacting with people from both margins of the Mediterranean, common people, civil activists, institutions, and I think the platform, the Sofia platform, will be certainly a marked initiative. You know what has to be done at European Union level to promote a new vision for the relationship between Europe and the Arab world and what is called the MENA region. I believe the parallel between what happened 20 years ago in the Eastern and Central Europe is inevitable with what is happening in the Arab revolutions. But we cannot ignore the differences also if we want to manage a successful relationship in the future, in the long run, with this part of our neighborhood regions. We cannot ignore the differences from what really was at stake 20 years ago. The Central and Eastern Europe, we were dealing with a space with common values and with the metrics of civilization and culture totally similar to our own civilization context, which is quite different. This is a quite different world, and we cannot ignore the differences between our world and the world which is now suffering such a dynamic of political transformation as the Arab world. Secondly, it's quite different to respond to situations which are really much more different. Nikolai said that each case was a case also in Eastern and Central Europe revolutions. But it's quite different, the homogeneity of those societies in the Arab and the Islamic world, between Morocco and Saudi Arabia, between Tunisia and Lebanon, between Algeria and Syria. A huge complex of specificities and differences in the political regimes, in the societies, has to be taken in consideration when we face the way to approach the support of those processes. Thirdly, the regimes. We were confronting the collapse of regimes that were hostile to European Union at that time. So it was easier also to deal with that reality. Now, as you know, and the embarrassing situations from the beginning of this process was also the result of the fact that we are confronting a reality that emerges from the collapse of regimes which were allies of Europeans and of West. And finally, we cannot ignore that at that time we were assisting to the collapse of a Soviet ideology, an aggressive and hostile ideology, and now we need to learn to live, and I think this is the most important challenge that we face. We need to learn to live within an emergent political Islam, which will be, for sure, a result also of this political transformation in all this part of the world. And at the same time, we need to learn on how to contain the spread of a radical Islam which will be associated to the opening of those societies, to freedom in those societies, and that will take certainly the opportunity to expand also their ideologies. So I think this is the reason why I have been considering what is happening now for Europe, the most serious strategic challenge that we face since the end of the Cold War and probably since the end of the Second World War. How to stabilize the relationship between Europe with the Arab and the MENA region, the Middle East and the North Africa region of our neighborhood, is a huge strategic challenge that we face. Much more serious, I think, and much more complex than the one we did face 20 years ago, and we were so successful in dealing with it, given the circumstances that now we have practically all those societies and countries integrated in the European Union, and we have a stable relationship with the other part of Europe. I will take the opportunity later to elaborate a little bit more on this. Thank you.
Thank you, but I would like to ask Mr. George Ishak, what is your revolution